out to you. Welcome, friends. Scott Fox After 9. Brand new episode is ready to go, and this one is going to cover a lot of different topics. So give me about 45 minutes, and I'm going to bring you a counter narrative to what you're seeing in the mainstream media. Yesterday, a lot of things were happening, and I'm going to try and give you a very concise summary right here in this pod with a lot of context, and you will hear directly from the people that are involved. On this episode, you're going to hear from Premier Ford, you're going to hear from Prime Minister Carney, you're going to hear from opposition leader Pierre Poilievre, you're going to hear from some American lawmakers, and you're going to hear from Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, because yesterday, I think we took a big step forward in trying to unleash Canada's energy superpower on the rest of the world. Alberta is going to be the proponent of a pipeline. The Alberta government, meaning the Alberta people, own it. But I don't know if BC is going to go for this. So we'll talk about that as well in this episode of the pod. I'm going to try and get it done as quickly as possible because I know you've got other things to do and maybe even other podcasts that you like to listen to. So thank you for giving me a bit of your time. Quick reminder, tomorrow is Listener DM Fridays. I'd love to hear from you. That's your chance to call me out. It's your chance to correct me, a chance to make a statement, a comment, whatever you want. Slide into my DMs at Scott Fox on air. And tomorrow, Anna Almeida is going to join me again on the pod. She's back from Greece, and she'll have your listener DMs right here on After 9. I want to start off by talking about a story that is of particular importance to me, and I think, if I'm reading the room right, to most Canadians. It involves Marineland. For those who don't know, there is a theme park in Niagara Falls, Canada, called Marineland, and it's been open since I was a kid. Marineland was always known for having orcas. They had Shamu, the killer whale, and people would go and watch the whales and the seals and the sea lions do all kinds of neat tricks, and it was a fun day out. But it's really fallen into a state of disrepair, and then through a series of legislative changes, they weren't allowed to have the orcas anymore, and they're mainly living off of beluga whales as their main source of entertainment. But the park is now closed. It wasn't in great shape. There's a lot of questions about how well cared for the marine life is at Marineland, and it's got a bad reputation, if I'm being honest. It does. Well, Marineland, even though it's not open to the public anymore, still has about 30 beluga whales in captivity. And we have to decide what to do with them. Marineland had applied to the federal government for permission to ship these whales over to a facility in China that does something very similar to what Marineland does. They put on those aquatic shows and people pay money to go and watch, and you know how these things go. The federal government has denied Marineland's request to ship those whales to China. So before I get to any audio on this, and I'm going to bring in Ontario Premier Doug Ford to weigh in on this in just a few minutes, I want to read you the statement from the federal minister in charge who denied this request, and I'm going to talk about why this is probably a death sentence for these belugas. Her statement reads, this morning, this is Joanne Thompson, by the way, Fisheries and Oceans Canada. That's her ministry. This morning, Fisheries and Oceans Canada informed Marineland, I have denied their request to export 30 belugas to the Chimlong Ocean Kingdom theme park in China. To approve the request would have meant a continued life in captivity and a return to public entertainment. The decision to not export these mammals aligns with the clear regulations laid out in the Fisheries Act and the amendments made in 2019, which aim to protect marine mammals from exploitation. Like many of you, I am angered that these whales have lived a life of captivity, and as a result, their health has deteriorated. As Canadians, we know that whales belong in the ocean, not in tanks for our amusement. I could not in good conscience approve an export that would perpetuate the treatment these belugas have endured. Canadians expect me to act in the best interest of the whales. Under different circumstances and regrettable outcomes, this is what I have done. Okay, that's the Honorable Joanne Thompson, the fisheries minister here in Canada, and it's her decision on whether or not to grant that. But what does that mean if she says no? Well, she said no, and because of that, those whales have to stay at Marineland, and they're just swimming around in a big tank, by the way. They don't have a whole lot of staff there. Marineland, though, because they're not even open to the public, generating income from people coming to see the whales, says they're losing about $2 million a month caring for these whales. That's part of the reason that they wanted to unload them, sell off the property, probably going to be some beautiful condos right on the Niagara River before the brink of the falls. Everybody wins. Not exactly. It doesn't look like the whales are going to win here. And I'll tell you why. Marineland is likely going to have to declare bankruptcy. That means they would have to surrender the belugas to the government. And we know that if the government takes over, they're not exactly equipped to handle whales either. They're going to euthanize them. They're going to kill these beluga whales, 30 of them. So in other words, the options are we could ship them over to China and they would continue doing what they're doing now at Marineland, except they would have more trainers and bigger tanks and crowds and the whole 9 yards. We could do that, but the fisheries minister says we can't allow them to be exported if they're going to be exploited over there. But the alternative is death. If I'm being very frank, the alternative is death. They're going to be euthanized. I'm really surprised that given that those are the stakes, that the federal government denied this request. Like I said, yesterday, Premier Doug Ford, Marineland is in Ontario, so this is his jurisdiction. He was asked about this in a news conference he was doing, and it seems that Doug is siding with the whales. Listen to this.
Any thoughts on Marineland today?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. You know, as I have said, it's disappointed that the federal government wouldn't sign off on moving them. You know, I'm an animal lover, and it's just a sad situation. I'm really encouraging the federal government to allow us to make sure that these whales survive in a really great atmosphere or a new home. But it's you know, it's terrible. And you put 30 whales in an acre. Like, give me a break. Like, they need to do a better job down at Marineland. But at the end of the day, if we want these whales to survive, we have to move them somewhere and make sure they have an appropriate area that they can live in, a large area.
That's a little bit of what the premier had to say yesterday. Frankly, I don't understand the argument. They say that if they stay at Marineland, they're going to be euthanized. If we move them to China, they're going to be forced to perform. I'd also point out, by the way, they were basically bred to perform. These were not born in the wild. Many of them were born at Marineland, and they've always known a trainer coming to work with them. And they've always known that if you want to fish, you've got to jump out of the water or do whatever it is that beluga whales do. They've always known that lifestyle, and that's very much what they would have if they're allowed to be shipped to China. I don't know that we got this one right. I understand that this is a difficult situation for the fisheries minister, but two things. Have we considered this? Number one, they say they won't survive if we release them back into the wild. How do we know that? You know, you can teach an old dog new tricks. What if we created a safe space in the ocean for them? The last time I was in Cuba, and it's been a long time, I had to do that dolphin excursion where they've got basically a fenced off area in the ocean where the dolphins are there and you go and do your dolphin encounter there. They're in the ocean, but they're not in any danger because they're protected from the other predators out there. And they get fed by trainers as opposed to having to hunt for food. Could we do something like that with the belugas? Take them up to the Arctic and set them back into the ocean. Could there be a cove somewhere where we can protect them and allow them to learn how to hunt? Would they actually starve to death? Or if it's sink or swim, literally and figuratively, would the whales figure out how to catch fish and keep themselves nourished? I don't know. I mean, all the experts say, oh, because they weren't born in the wild, they'll never survive in the wild. Isn't that better than them just swimming around in that tank at Marineland until we eventually shoot them? Isn't that the better alternative, to at least give them a fighting chance? I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want to see these whales die. And frankly, I don't want to know what the rest of the world is going to say about Canada if not only do we kill 30 beluga whales for a silly reason, we're also going to kill those ostriches out in British Columbia. And it seems more and more like that's the next order of business for the federal government, is taking out those ostriches. Seems to be a real assault on animal life here in Canada, and I don't like it. I don't want this to be my Canada. These whales are, through no fault of their own, swimming around in a dirty tank at Marineland, and they've got to have a better quality of life. I understand why the federal government doesn't want to release them to someone who's going to get them to perform. I totally understand that. But if the alternative is death, why wouldn't we at least consider something that's going to keep them alive and well fed? I think we really need to lean on our government here and ask them to reconsider that decision or figure it out. There's other places we could put these whales. I suggested creating a safe area for them in the ocean, up in the Arctic somewhere. We got lots and lots and lots of space up there. Or maybe we just let them go. Let them go into the Atlantic and see what they do. And maybe some of them will live, some of them will die. I don't know, but it's got to be better than swimming around in that tank. Maybe we can find another facility that's willing to take them in. I think we need to explore all options. I'm going to follow this Marineland story, and God help the politicians, because they will have blood on their hands if these whales are basically sentenced to death and we have to put them down rather than send them somewhere where they could lead probably a great life. Now, I understand that people don't necessarily like the idea of them having to perform to get food, but that's what they've always known. So if that's the alternative to death, then I'm okay with that. Something's got to happen to protect these whales. Also, I mentioned the ostriches. Yesterday in Ottawa, opposition leader Pierre Poilievre got asked about the ostriches. Let me give you a little bit of context. It seems that this has become very much a left and right issue, with people on the right fighting to try and keep these ostriches alive. And that's not to say all people on the left, by the way, want the ostriches killed. It just seems to be that this is becoming a political issue, and it really shouldn't be. I think there's some scientific opportunity in keeping those ostriches alive. But a lot of people, especially on the right, have noticed the leader on the right, Pierre Poilievre, hasn't really talked about this topic. Yesterday, a reporter in Ottawa asked him.
Stance on the ostriches in British Columbia and the culling order that they are facing.
Really incredible that the Liberals have caused so much. Because of Liberal incompetence, we're in this mess. And when you have an incompetent government, you have messes like the inflation crisis, like the crime crisis, like the border crisis, like the investment crisis, like the fastest shrinking economy in the entire G7. When you have an incompetent government, you get lots of these messes.
Wait, on the ostriches, sir. Sir, you didn't say what your stance is on the ostriches.
This lady
Why won't you answer your stance on the ostriches?
I just did. I said the Liberals are incompetent. That's my stance.
Do you support the culling order?
Can I just...
Can we get your reaction to the new lumber tariffs?
That's disappointing from Pierre Poilievre. I'll be perfectly honest. That is disappointing. I want to know where my federal leaders stand on protecting animals. We've got the ostrich thing happening in B.C. We've got the belugas happening in Niagara Falls. And frankly, it's ridiculous that this is going on. I think we need to, at all costs, try and protect life. Again, the whales didn't ask for this. The ostriches didn't ask for this, but they're facing a death sentence. And frankly, it seems like the Liberals are okay to just kill a whole bunch of animals. What is there, like 200 ostriches and 30 whales? Good Lord. That's a horrible day for whoever's got to carry that out. Now, if you're a longtime listener of my podcast, you likely know that I'm a dad. I have a son and I have a daughter, and both of them are very impressive scientists. And I asked my daughter, who is a zoologist, if she could give me a little bit of feedback on this situation at Marineland. And coming from a zoologist, I think we should take this feedback seriously. This just came in from my little girl, although not that little anymore. She's out there in the workforce doing amazing things for conservation and preservation. And I asked her, what would be so bad with releasing them into the wild? Turns out the suggestion I made a few minutes ago was not a good one. This just came in. Dad, they denied the whales going to China because the aquariums are not larger and they'd go back to doing shows and touch tanks and stuff like that. It's right back to exploiting them like they were used to here. They really can't be released into the wild for a lot of reasons. They've never known what a predator is. They'd honestly die really quickly. They've also never had to hunt. So if they weren't used to hunting, they'd probably starve. They've also never known tides. If they weren't hunted in the first few days or hours, they'd be washed ashore. And who knows how impacted their echolation abilities are from the concrete tanks and isolation. Euthanasia sucks, and it is a bad option, but kinder than releasing them into the wild, in my opinion. They die together and peacefully rather than thrown out into an alien world to die. I think an open ocean pen is their best option. You could study their ability to adapt and see if they could eventually be released. This would never be approved, though, because it would be very expensive. By the way, other dangers are things like boats. They're not taught to stay away from them in the tanks at Marineland. They would also be drawn to people and then likely injured or killed when boats go by. Okay, well, hey, there's a scientist's opinion, and I'm going to say an expert opinion right there. My suggestion to release them into the wild, probably not the best suggestion, but anyway, it seems like my daughter and I are very aligned, and thank you very much to her for weighing in on that. The whales thing. I'll stay on it, everybody. I promise you I will. Yesterday, we got something. Do I want to go to Alberta? Yeah. I wanted to go to Alberta for just a sec because yesterday, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith made a great announcement, and this is about the future of Canada. We've all known, since Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre both agreed, that the way forward for Canada is to build up our own internal systems to make sure that we can get our vast resources out to market, to find new markets to sell to. And one of the ways that we need to do that is by building infrastructure. A pipeline is the key part of that infrastructure so that we can get our oil from Alberta out to the coasts where it can be shipped via tanker to our overseas customers. Yesterday, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith made a huge announcement in progress in getting a pipeline built to British Columbia. Listen to the Premier.
We've come together here today because Canada stands at a critical crossroads. Beneath our feet here in Alberta, we stand on oil reserves valued at over $9 trillion. This resource wealth presents Canada and Canadians with boundless opportunities. This wealth would equate to hundreds of billions of dollars in government revenue that could be used to support core social programs like healthcare and education, bolster Canada's national security commitments under NATO, and unlock economic prosperity for Indigenous peoples. Not only would it allow for governments at all levels across the country to fund social programs, it would generate job creation and wealth for Canadians and Albertans on a scale rarely seen in recent decades. This type of transformational wealth cannot be kept in the ground, and Canadians agree. Over the past 6 months, it has become clear that Canadians nationwide see the tremendous opportunity that we have to unleash the economic potential of our energy sector. In fact, recent polling has shown that 3/4 of Canadians support building a new oil pipeline. Additionally, the global demand for oil is increasing, and the world wants more Canadian oil and gas. We've heard this from Asia, in Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and Indonesia, to name a few. We've heard this from Europe, and we know that we need to deliver on global energy security efforts. There are billions of people around the world living in energy poverty who demand a higher standard of living. This is not just a question of Alberta's energy, it is a global moral imperative.
I'll pause Premier Smith there because that's a very compelling piece of research. 3/4 of Canadians agree we need another pipeline in Canada. 3/4 of Canadians don't agree on much, if I'm being honest. The fact that 3/4 of Canadians agree we need a pipeline, I think that that's very telling. Quick history lesson. Part of the reason that this is an issue is because we have these laws on the books, thank you to Justin Trudeau, which don't allow us to build any more pipelines. And Mark Carney has said, well, you know, we could get rid of that law, but there's nobody even asking to build a pipeline. Well, this is a chicken and egg scenario. Part of the reason that nobody has applied for a permit to build one of these pipelines is because they're currently illegal. So do they need to be legal for someone to apply to build one, or do we need somebody to apply to build one before we reverse the law and make them legal? Well, this game has gone on and on for about 6 months now since Mark Carney took over, and finally Alberta has stepped in and said, fine, we're not going to get anybody coming forward asking to build a pipeline while they're currently not allowed. So the people of Alberta will be the proponent of this pipeline. The Alberta taxpayers, led by the Alberta government, are going to own the pipeline that's going to send oil, about 1 million barrels a day, from Alberta out to the BC coast. Here's more of Premier Smith.
What stands before us right now is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to unlock our wealth of resources and become a world-leading energy superpower, creating lasting prosperity for generations to come. But to realize this potential, the federal government must make meaningful and substantive reforms to Canada's regulatory environment to revive investor certainty. The simple fact is that you will not see companies sink billions of dollars into new major projects unless the federal government overturns or overhauls its Trudeau-era anti-resource development policies. And that includes the oil and gas emissions cap, which we know is a production cap, Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines law, and the tanker ban, which have made investment in new oil and gas projects extremely difficult.
Why haven't we gotten rid of that? Isn't that something that Prime Minister Carney was supposed to do? And I mean, this is an easy one. It's not even like it needs to go through Parliament. He could get rid of that law with the stroke of a pen, basically. And if it does need to go through Parliament, I don't think the Conservatives are going to oppose it. They could very easily repeal those laws and allow Canada to have a pipeline and ship much more of our oil out and start making our economy cook again. We could start making the middle class prosperous again. We're talking about jobs and economic opportunity, more revenue for the government so they need less of it from us via our taxes. There's so many reasons that we should do this, and I think that's part of the reason that 3/4 of Canadians want this pipeline built. It seems to me, this is just my opinion, and again, if you're a new listener, I'll declare my bias. I'm a conservative. I have conservative values. I think making a pipeline makes perfect sense. I don't know why we wouldn't do it, but I'm also aware that because of environmental ideology, this government is very hamstrung in that part of the party probably wants pipelines. I think there's liberals out there that agree we need pipelines. But the far left flank of the party, the green people, they do not want pipelines and they do not want any more fossil fuels burned, and they would rather leave those trillions of dollars in the ground. Well, now Alberta is basically going to give Ottawa an ultimatum. You can't say there's no proponent of it because we'll be the proponent of it. Let's see you reverse the laws so that we can get started. If the Carney government doesn't do that, it tells you everything you need to know about how serious or unserious Mark Carney is about trying to revive our economy.
Major investment is what grows our economy, creates jobs, prosperity, and enhances our standard of living. And without question, a new oil pipeline to the Northwest BC coast would have the greatest economic benefit of any new nation-building project. For example, had we completed the Northern Gateway project, the Energy East project, and the Keystone XL pipeline project, Canada's GDP today would be $55 billion stronger each and every year. We cannot let another opportunity of this economic magnitude pass us by again. And that's why we are announcing that the government of Alberta will be the proponent of an oil pipeline to the Northwest BC coast. With the support and technical advice of 3 major pipeline companies, including Southbow, Enbridge, and Trans Mountain, our government will make a formal application to the Federal Project Office under the Building Canada Act. Today, we are beginning the engagement process with Indigenous groups across Alberta and British Columbia to ensure that they can be part of this nation-building effort. That conversation must begin with Indigenous engagement, not as a checkbox, but as a foundation for relationship building, trust, and shared leadership. This will lay the groundwork for full and thorough consultation as this project meets regulatory milestones.
Well said by Premier Smith. And yes, it is essential that we get buy-in from our Indigenous populations. And frankly, I don't know why they would oppose it. Sure, they have a caretaker responsibility to protect our country, our earth, and our environment. Absolutely. But we're talking a lot of money and a lot of prosperity for their populations as well. And I have to think that they're going to look at this opportunity and probably want to get behind it. So if we've got the Alberta government that's going to be the proponent of this pipeline, they've got Indigenous buy-in so far, and they're going to keep consulting until they get the rest, why wouldn't we do this? Well, the only obstacle here is Ottawa. Is Ottawa going to let Alberta do what Alberta wants to do, or is Ottawa going to get in the way and make them leave it in the ground? It remains to be seen, but with Alberta getting ready for a referendum on potential sovereignty, I don't know if this is a good time for Mark Carney to start telling Alberta no. Let's get to some of the Q&A with Premier Smith.
Hi, Lauren Krugel, Canadian Press. Following up on that, could you talk a little bit about what kind of conversations, if any, you've had with Premier Eby recently leading up to this? Has he been given the heads up that this was coming? And how confident are you that, it's possible to persuade him that this is in Canada's interest?
I did give him a courtesy call on Monday to let him know that this was coming. And I saw his initial reaction, and obviously we have some work to do. I mean, I understand the priorities that he has on some of the projects that have come forward. And as I said, we're very supportive. We're very supportive of a optimization of the Trans Mountain pipeline that might add another 275,000 barrels a day. We think that's a great project. We're very supportive of all of the natural gas development, LNG Canada too, which is on the list, as well as Silisms and others that have been indicated that might get there. We think that that is going to be good for not only British Columbia, but also for us. We're also very supportive of talking about ways in which we can build interties so that we can assist BC in times where they have drought in being able to provide a secure energy backup and vice versa. We have a biodiesel facility that is up in operation. Most of that is destined for the BC market with their clean fuel standards, and we hope to do more of that. So I like to build with the other premiers on areas in which we agree. We don't always agree on everything all the time, but I think we've got a lot of common ground to start from. And I think as we continue on and build the relationships that will be able to I hope, win him over.
I'm going to leave Premier Smith there. She was talking about the Premier of British Columbia, David Eby. He is very much an environmentalist, and so far, there is no indication that he would ever get behind another pipeline going through British Columbia. I'm wondering if that's what British Columbians want, though. I mean, British Columbia pays some of the highest gas prices in Canada. I have to think that if there were a pipeline sending oil and gas right there through British Columbia, it might actually help with that. It would definitely be a major boost for our economy. But are they going to do the common sense, smart thing in BC, or is environmental ideology going to get in their way? Well, let's find out. Here is British Columbia Premier David Eby.
To put that tanker ban at threat, it's not just a threat to our pristine coast that so many British Columbians, including myself, value, but it is a direct economic threat to the kind of economy that we're trying to build in the country here. And so when I've said, let's cross that bridge when we come to it, we'll see what the Premier comes up with, I'm being polite. I am being polite. There is no project. There is no bridge to cross unless the Albertan government and the federal Canadian government are committing billions of taxpayer dollars to build this project. And if that is the plan, then they should be transparent about it. Don't mistake my politeness for weakness on protecting our economy and our coast.
Something I want to just drill down on a little bit here, just back at the beginning. What he first said, I think that tells us everything we need to know about whether or not British Columbia is going to support this Alberta initiative to build a pipeline that would go through Northwest BC.
It's not just a threat to our pristine coast that so many British Columbians, including myself, value, but it is a direct economic threat to the kind of economy that we're trying to build in the country here.
A direct threat to the type of economy we're trying to build. You see, David Eby is very much about the green revolution, the Green New Deal, the future. The way that everybody's going to get rich is not through selling oil and gas and things like that, LNG. It's going to be through building windmills and solar panels and things like that. Friends, I don't accept that. 3/4 of the country wants a pipeline, according to Premier Smith's numbers, and it makes no sense to not move forward with this. It just doesn't make any sense. If there's a proponent for it, and now the Alberta government themselves say they're in favor of it, they're going to help do it, then why on earth would anyone stand in the way? If Indigenous populations are properly consulted and we get their buy-in, why would the government of British Columbia get in the way of this, other than ideology. And unfortunately, this is going to turn into a fight. And it doesn't need to be a fight. It's something Canadians agree we want and need, but it's going to turn into a fight. And if I know Canadians, like I think I do, it's likely going to become a left versus right issue, when it shouldn't be that at all. This is about saving our economy. This is about middle-class prosperity. We have someone ready to take on this pipeline, the Alberta government. Let's get moving, Prime Minister Carney, and let's get moving out of the way, David Eby. One more person that we should hear from here. Yesterday, Pierre Poilievre was asked what he thought about the announcement coming out of Alberta.
Have scared away all of the private businesses that normally build pipelines with their own money. While Canadian pipeline company Enbridge builds 2 pipelines in the United States of America, and TransCanada Pipelines is investing $8.5 billion building projects again in the United States of America. And Imperial Oil shuts down its Calgary office, killing 900 jobs. No major private company is willing to build pipelines to ship oil under this Liberal government in Canada. Why? Because Carney and the Liberals have kept in place their laws that ban increased production, pipeline construction, and shipping of oil off the northwest BC coast. These projects should be built by private investors because they are wildly profitable. They should be money-making projects for both the industry and paying taxes into the government. Instead, after a decade of Liberals and under the weak, incompetent leadership of Mark Carney, business is losing money and taxpayers have to bail them out. It's the simple thing for Mark Carney to do is get out of the way.
Simple thing for Mark Carney to do, get out of the way. Simple thing for David Eby to do, get out of the way. If you don't want to get behind us, feel free to get in front of us. But either way, this has got to get done. And I really, really hope that we make some progress on this soon. We need to. These pipelines are something that people want. We all agreed that if we are going to save our economy, it begins with using our natural resources. That's oil, that is LNG, that is critical minerals, and what have you. We've just got to do this. Otherwise, the whole elbows up thing was a complete fraud. This was part of Elbows Up. We've got to make ourselves our own best customer. We've got to open up to new markets, and we've got to start doing stuff like this, building pipelines. They said, well, there's no proponent for it, so there's no need to change the law. Now you've got a proponent, Mark Carney, and you've got to get on it. Before I get to some of Ontario Premier Doug Ford's news conference and then a little trip down south to find out how the U.S. government shutdown is going, let's check into yesterday in Ottawa, question period. This is Pierre Poilievre asking a question of the Prime Minister. It's an interesting exchange.
After the Prime Minister broke his promise to, quote, negotiate a win with the Americans by July 21st, lumber tariffs have more than doubled, and job losses are piling up. Cap Paper is potentially laying off 300 workers in Northern Ontario. That's on top of 800 workers who are losing their jobs at Imperial Oil. TransCanada and Enbridge are building more in the United States as their headquarters move south after the Prime Minister broke his promise to build, baby, build. Yeah. Doesn't the Prime Minister realize that when he doesn't do his job, Canadians lose theirs?
Here. Right Honourable Prime Minister. Here.
Mr. Speaker, our sympathies are with the families of the workers at Imperial Oil. Our actions are with the workers and the management of Cap Paper, who are having meetings with the Minister of Industry, a variety of other government officials today to work. Our support is foursquare behind Algoma Steel, with $400 million between the federal government and the province of Ontario to build Canada strong.
I mean, he says he wants to build Canada strong, but he doesn't actually do anything to build Canada strong. We've got to repeal the laws that are preventing us from getting our resources to market. Get rid of the tanker ban. Get rid of the ban on pipelines. All of these things need to change, and we need to loosen up the regulations as well so that these projects can get built quickly. Don't we all agree on that? I really thought we all agreed on that. I'm not sure why the Prime Minister is dragging his feet here. Let's hear the rest of that exchange.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, since he took office, 86,000 more Canadians are unemployed, and we have the second highest unemployment in the G7. This is all the result of out-of-control government spending and taxes. Every dollar the Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians, and now the Parliamentary Budget Officer rates his deficit, says, quote, very alarming, stupefying, shocking, unsustainable. If you don't change, this is done. Something is going to break. We are at the edge of a cliff. Those are the words of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. When will he stop his out-of-control spending? When he's over the edge of the cliff?
Here, here. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there's a little thing called cause and effect. And the cause that the Leader of the Opposition is missing is the U.S. tariffs. The U.S. tariffs that are hitting steel, the U.S. tariffs that are hitting lumber, the U.S. tariffs that are hitting our auto sector. That's why we need to build this country strong. That's why we're getting spending under control. That's why we're going to spend less to invest more. I believe in this country, Mr. Speaker. Come join us.
Well, he doesn't make any sense. You know, I gave Mark a lot of credit for answering questions, and I think it's great that he at least tries. Way more fulsome than what Justin Trudeau used to give us, which was a word salad. But what he's saying doesn't make sense. And by the way, all leaders, I said it about Doug Ford all summer long, and I think he's finally getting the message. Now Mark Carney needs to get the message. You can't cherry pick Donald Trump when you want to use him as an excuse. Stop blaming all of our problems on tariffs, because the reality is that's not what's causing the problem. The tariffs are not the issue. We're our own biggest issue. We're holding ourselves back from growing. Does anybody see it another way? Feel free to weigh in on that for listener DMs tomorrow. As you know, I love dissenting opinions. I love civil discourse. I like to hear opposing points of view. If you think what Mark Carney is doing is good, if you think he's on the right track, by all means, let me know. It's just I'm really struggling to see it because it doesn't seem like we're making any progress here. Now let's go south of the border before I get to the premier. Actually, you know what? Before I go south of the border, there's a new scandal brewing in Ottawa. I'm going to get this on everybody's radar now. There's an ethics investigation that's been happening in Ottawa, and I'm going to take you to a committee meeting that happened yesterday. This is about 2 minutes long. I feel like it's worth listening to, and this is right before I get to the U.S. government shutdown in 2 minutes.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Conacher, Mr. Carney's ethics disclosure states that he is entitled to carried interest payments, aka future bonus pay, in respect of the performance of Brookfield's global transition funds, in which he co-led efforts to raise billions of dollars of capital for. But what is missing from Mr. Carney's disclosure are the holdings in this fund, the companies that this fund is invested in. Would you agree that this is a significant and material omission from the standpoint of knowing the extent of Mr. Carney's conflicts of interest?
Yes, and unfortunately, though, the disclosure rules allow for secret investments, essentially. The details are not provided.
It's a material omission, would you agree? Because Mr. Carney handpicked the holdings in the companies that the fund is invested in, and therefore the companies his future performance pay worth potentially tens of millions of dollars is tied to, correct?
Yes, so when you have these kind of general funds, which again, it's legal to invest in some of them and keep it secret, some types of mutual funds, the details of what you're actually invested in is known to you, but not disclosed to the public.
So Mr. Carney therefore knows which public policy decisions will impact these holdings, which in turn impacts the future performance of the fund, which in turn affects the value of his future bonus pay. Meanwhile, Canadians are left in the dark. So Mr. Carney, as it pertains to his future bonus pay, is hiding his conflicts of interest from Canadians, isn't he?
Yes, again, that's legal to do, and what's even worse, because of another, the biggest loophole in the Act, He is allowed to participate in decisions 99% of the time that affect his investments.
Holy cow. I thought we put the disclosure thing to bed. Remember, he came out and he said, I've disclosed everything and blind trust and yada, yada, yada. Turns out that may not be the case. In fact, this is like tens of millions of dollars that the prime minister stands to make here, and we still don't know about all of his conflicts. That was the Standing Committee on Access to Information and Conflicts of Interest. If you want to look that up more, feel free. Right now, a little bit of smoke, but I don't necessarily see a fire. If the fire erupts and this becomes a full-blown scandal or more comes out about it, I'll try and cover it here in Scott Fox After 9. Now let's go to south of the border. The U.S. government is still shut down. Today is day 2. I want to play for you a little bit of something that happened yesterday on Capitol Hill. We have Senator Chuck Schumer doing an interview on CNN. Listen to this.
Every Republican who's gone on TV the last 12 hours or so has called this the Schumer shutdown. What do you say about that name? Senator Schumer, can you hear me?
I can't hear.
Senator Schumer, can you hear me? I don't think Senator Schumer can hear me right now. Maybe the government shutdown included audio on Capitol Hill.
Interesting, right? I mean, he heard every question up until then. The Schumer shutdown is something that Americans are calling this, and it's mainly, if you heard my episode yesterday, I explained over the Democrats' insistence that in order to fund the government and increase their debt ceiling, allow the government to pay its bills, get out of the shutdown, basically, the only way the Democrats are going to support that is if it includes health care for illegal aliens. People that are in America illegally. They want that. And frankly, I don't think that's something that any Republican is going to agree to. Here is a response that came from the U.S. Vice President, J.D. Vance.
Right in the back, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. You responded to a post on X of Chuck Schumer on the House floor back in 1996, railing against illegal immigrants receiving taxpayer-funded benefits. You said Chuck Schumer once recognized that it was disastrous to give illegal aliens rewards for breaking the law. Now he wants to shut down the government unless we reward illegal aliens for breaking the law. Why has Chuck Schumer changed his stance?
You know, that's a good question. Actually, it's a very tough question. Asking me to get in the head of Chuck Schumer is not a place I particularly want to be, but my basic read on it is that the entire Democratic Party, the political leadership, not every Democrat nationwide, but the political leadership of their party has got it into their heads that the only way to be compassionate is to be compassionate to illegal aliens rather than American citizens. If you go back to what Bill Clinton was saying, even Barack Obama in some cases, what he was saying about illegal immigration 10, 15, 20 years ago, you would put them on the MAGA right based purely on their rhetoric around illegal immigration. So I don't know why they've gone so far to the left. I think it's bad for the country. I think it's bad for them politically. But our principle, all I can do is speak for the president that I serve and the country, the administration that I serve right now. We believe that the American people's government exists for the American people. That means the people who have the legal right to be here, and that's why we're fighting to reopen the government. And unfortunately, the Democrats are fighting to shut it down for the benefit of illegal aliens. And I'll take a couple more, and then I'll let Caroline, I'll go back to my day job so Caroline can go back to hers.
Imagine making that the hill you want to die on. I'm really not sure why the Democrats are going down this road, but I think every day it becomes more and more obvious to the American people that the reason their government isn't functioning, the reason soldiers aren't getting paid and border workers aren't getting paid or air traffic controllers aren't getting paid is because of a stupid ideology that you provide health care coverage to people who are in the country illegally, people whose first act when they entered the country was breaking the law. I don't know where they're coming from on that, but I don't think it's a good look for them. Vice President Vance. It's ironic because he was selected as the running mate by Donald Trump, partially because of his communication skills. And whereas Trump is normally number one and the vice president is just somewhere in the back, J.D. Vance has really been front and center, and I think he's doing a great job as vice president. One more thing to play on this, and this has to do with Canada. It has to do with the U.S. It has to do with all governments because this was many, many years ago. I'm glad I found this clip and I want to bring it back. Warren Buffett, expert investor. Some consider Warren Buffett to be one of the smartest investing minds of our time. Brilliant on the economy. He had a suggestion that I think we should consider for America and for Canada, and it would solve a heck of a lot of our problems. Listen to Warren Buffett.
I can end the deficit in 5 minutes. You just pass a law that says that anytime there's a deficit of more than 3% of GDP, all sitting members of Congress are ineligible for re-election. Yeah. Now you've got the incentives in the right place, right?
Could you imagine that? What if we put in a law, and it would only take one politician to get elected and get this through? What if we had a law that all of these career politicians there in Ottawa that are just sucking the teat of the taxpayer and trying to get every perk they can out of us, waste as much money as possible? What if it was a law that when the books are bad, when the budget isn't balanced, or when our debt to GDP ratio reaches a certain threshold, they're not eligible for re-election? They're not even eligible to run if they have not done their job at managing the books until then. You watch how quickly we would get our finances in order. You watch how quickly they would get that debt under control if they were not eligible to continue on in their role if they couldn't do their job. It's basic accountability. Brilliant comment, even though, like I said, that's very old, but that was Warren Buffett on what he would do to demand accountability out of our politicians. I'm going to play just a little bit of Premier Doug Ford. This is Ontario Premier Doug Ford. He yesterday was doing a news conference at Queen's Park in Toronto with the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. And the media was doing their thing afterwards. Let's hear a little bit of what Doug had to say in this Q&A.
Shutdown in the U.S. Is this the time for Democrats to stand up to President Trump?
Well, you know what, I will tell you that right now there are a lot of tough conversations happening in the United States, including at my own state level. We completed a continuation budget at $350 this morning in hopes of not emulating the shutdown in Washington, D.C. So I'm proud of what we've been able to do. I never look to Washington, D.C. for solving my problems at the state level, but I hope that they can resolve it quickly and in a way that it benefits the American people. And, beyond that, I don't know that I've got a lot more insight on D.C.
Sorry, the governor had to catch a flight. Yeah, it's unfortunate. As I have said, I'm disappointed that the federal government wouldn't sign off on moving them. I'm an animal lover, and it's just a sad situation. I'm really encouraging the federal government to allow us to make sure that these whales survive in a really great atmosphere or a new home. But it's terrible. And you put 30 whales in an acre. Like, give me a break. Like, they need to do a better job down at Marineland. But at the end of the day, if we want these whales to survive, we have to move them somewhere and make sure they have an appropriate area that they can live in, a large area. I don't like this. Yeah, I don't like these whales.
The spokesperson said if they're not moved, if they're not exported, they'll likely be euthanized.
Yeah, that's terrible. Absolutely terrible. So we need the federal government to sign off on it, or these whales they're on their hands because we want to help and move them.
The feds are saying that if they are moved to the escape park in China, they'd still be under in captivity. These bad conditions you talked about.
Yeah, but what we can do, it's not just going to China. We can look at other areas that will take these whales. We don't have to move all 30 in one shot. A couple here, a couple there, and we want them to survive. And if they don't, well, the federal government has to answer on that one.
Good to hear Premier Ford and the full set of comments that he made about the whales at Marineland.
General is looking at the skills development fund.
Yes.
Without going into details, the embargo hasn't lifted, but do you still support that fund?
Oh, it's one of the greatest programs, Richard, that we've ever created. There's over 700,000 jobs and training that has happened. People with disabilities that typically would sit at home and collect the government check are now able to go out there and work and find a skilled trade in different types of jobs, and we spread it right across different sectors. So we have to make sure that our jobs of the future, our people are being trained for it. As we see, we're getting hit in the auto sector, we're getting hit in other tariffs sectors, and we need to make sure our population is trained to jump in there, no matter if it's the nuclear expansion of energy or if it's our critical minerals and many other things.
Okay, and that was a little bit of Premier Ford talking about the Auditor General's report that came out yesterday, suggesting there may have been some improprieties or something to that effect in the skills and training development area. I don't really follow this scandal that much. I haven't really read a whole ton about it, but one thing I have noticed about that is the same people who are using yesterday's Auditor General's report trying to climb all over the Premier and the Labor Minister and so on and so forth are people who didn't even bat an eye when all of the money was being wasted in Ottawa on so many different things. The same people who cheered on Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney blowing billions and billions and billions of our tax dollars are now freaking out that Premier Ford might, or his government might, have had some improprieties in how money was distributed and who got jobs through the skills and training development or whatever it is. Like I said, I don't really follow this one because I don't think it's a scandal. I really don't. If somebody wants to speak to me otherwise about that and show me why I should care about that, I'm all ears. I'd love to hear it from you. But right now, like I said, I'm hearing criticism from the left who did nothing to criticize Trudeau and Carney when they were blowing all kinds of money. And now all of a sudden they're concerned about a few $1 million from Doug Ford. So I don't take that particularly seriously at the moment, but I'm open to hearing arguments about it. Tomorrow is the listener DM special. I do it every Friday. Anna's going to be here, and I would love to hear from you. You can slide into my DMs at Scott Fox On Air. Friends, that's going to do it for me. I will wrap it up with my favorite song for podcasting. It's called Hey Now. This is Pat James and The Whole Truth. I'll see you back here tomorrow.